When the people in power are not doing anything about the most pressing problems in your life, then who gives about an event that's 16 months ago where the facts of what happened were pretty clear as day within just a few weeks of the incident?
All right, so Saagar Enjeti got into some backlash and also some support over a tweet that he had made on Twitter, and then he subsequently made a video to kind of give some more thoughts on this. Saagar, if you don't know, is somebody he's one of the co-hosts on Breaking Points, who's supposed to essentially, be the right-wing populist guy, of which, right-wing populism isn't even really like a real thing. It's kind of like a fake thing where you fake to be in favor of like populist causes when really all you care about is like, being racist and things like that. But anyways, what you're going to see here is, I'll show you the tweet here. He sent out a tweet saying, gas is $5 a gallon, people. Genuinely can't imagine giving a shit about these January 6th hearings. So currently there's been the January 6th hearings going on. I know I haven't covered it much, but it is something that I personally believe is very serious because there was obviously literally an attempt by the President of the United States to overthrow democracy, which is the biggest crime, in a society. That's the biggest crime because, society tumbles as a result of all of that. And so any other crimes you can think of can't be prosecuted if you don't have the democracy that was then overthrown. So really, that's actually the most extreme crime that you can actually commit because the entirety of society, all the institutions you've created, law, legal, precedent, all that stuff, just it dies. And so any other crimes that are committed are impacted by that itself. And obviously the fundamentals of the institutions, etc. But he doesn't really seem to think that it's a big deal, and he's trying to put the backdrop against inflation as to what's going on, as if nobody's talking about inflation. Why is everyone talking about January 6th and not inflation? As if every fucking news story you read in the news isn't about inflation. Literally every single one. And Fox News is the only one where they're trying, they're not covering the January 6th hearings. And so, check out some video footage here, and then also before I get into more, you can check out some video footage I'll leave.
Overwhelming pushback to me was, what? Saagar thinks the price of gas is more important than democracy. And my response is that if you're trying to make people care about our capital D democracy more than focusing on the problems that they're actually having in their lives and begging politicians to fix, then you, not me, are the person who is against actual democracy. When I say capital D democracy, I mean it in terms of how it's being used by the press. Protecting the higher-minded institution. It's what the Washington Post loves to put at the top of its paper. Democracy dies in the darkness. It's what Democrats and Biden are always talking about. But what they like to ignore is little d democracy. Democracy as in the people's government, where they make their voices heard through their votes, and they attempt, being the key word, to get their representatives to act on their behalf. Overwhelmingly, we see today in the obsession with January 6th that by focusing on that, instead of gas prices and high inflation, the issues that voters continue to tell pollsters and cry out as their #1 priority that the US government solve, what the obsession with January 6th shows me is that Democrats are unserious about acting democratically. Let's take Pennsylvania GOP gubernatorial candidate Doug Mastriano. Mastriano is actually crazy. He believes in Stop the Steal. He pushed a plan to appoint fake electors in 2020 to try and swing the election. If he's elected governor of Pennsylvania, he gets to appoint the Secretary of State, potentially try and change the election results. I agree with the libs that that is an actual attack on democracy. And yet, they don't seem content on trying to persuade people not to vote for him for any reason beyond that. You know why? Because while, yeah, I think most voters can agree, that sounds pretty crazy. If Doug Mastriano is also out there talking about inflation and gas and rent and cost of living and chaos in people's lives, and the other side is just screaming about what might happen in an election a few years from now, voters might just take a chance on the guy because one is real and the other is hypothetical. We saw this repeatedly in the 2016 campaign. Hillary's "Our children are watching" ads. Trump was vulgar, while Trump was out there making a real case. Look, it's turned out to be a fake one, but at least it was for rooting out corruption in Washington, restoring America's trade fairness scheme, restoring American jobs, and voters said, yeah, I don't particularly care about the tweets. I care about the plan. That's what democracy actually looks like. But to most liberals, the idea of actually trying to win through democratic or at least constitutional means today appears to be a fantasy. If you think Trump and the GOP and Doug Mastriano are such threats to democracy, then beat them through democratic means. Mastriano is the best example. There's no cope for people about the Electoral College in a statewide popular vote election. You either convince voters or you don't, and it's a swing state. The same is the case with many of these Jan 6 crazies that are GOP nominees across the country. If they win, that is on you for being so pathetic that you cannot convince voters otherwise. People in Washington and in the media are obsessed with the word democracy, but the reaction to my tweet really showed me this is all fake. They are obsessed with high-minded discussions of democracy because they have no actual small d democratic plan or case to make to the American people to solve the most pressing issues before them. The discussions of democracy are really just a catfish to hide the fact that Biden and the Democrats have been in office at this point for 18 months and to date have done basically nothing about the problems that most people have in their lives. Thus, they will be punished. That's democracy. So I'll end as I began with the same sentiment. When the people in power are not doing anything about the most pressing problems in your life, then who gives a shit about an event that 16 months ago, where the facts of what happened were pretty clear as day within just a few weeks of the incident? If you actually believe about American democracy, then convince people to vote for you. And if you're too big of a loser to beat Trump or a guy like Mastriano, then sadly, that is a pathetic commentary on you and really not on anybody else.
So he ends up making a few different points there, but honestly he seems to make one like central point, it seems to be, which is like this idea of, you have to convince people democratically. For Democrats need to convince people through democratic means, which this would still be democratic means, but he's basically saying that they're focusing on the stop the steal instead of like the issues like inflation or things that he says are impacting regular people. But, obviously you have to focus on both of those things. Like, we can do multiple things at once. We can have the January 6th hearings and we can still be concerned about inflation and working to alleviate those causes, right? We can do multiple things. You see this kind of thing a lot where it's like, oh yeah, we can only do one thing specifically. And I also just disagree with the idea that like the January 6th hearings are just taking up all of the news coverage when every single day there's constant talks about inflation nonstop. So I completely disagree with that. But why should you only have to compete with people who don't believe in democracy in means on issues? It's like, I guess you're trying to convince people to vote for somebody, for you, not because the opponent doesn't believe in democracy itself, but because their policies are bad. But they don't even believe in democracy to begin with. The entire system that this is built on, they don't believe in it in the first place. So that's a really important thing to point out and say, hey, that person doesn't even believe in democracy. So I don't know, I find it a little bit weird to be like, okay, forget the fact that they don't believe in democracy. Let me just compete with them in the realm of ideas elsewhere, like inflation or minimum wage and stuff like that. Like, why? Why should you do that? I'm not really understanding what the reason is. And then he's doing like an equivocation. I don't know if he's doing like equivocation, but he brings up the Hillary Clinton stuff of Trump uses vulgar words in his tweets and videos and stuff. These are nowhere close to the same things. I mean, that was obviously, a bad strategy, but this is, you're talking about a literal attempt at overthrowing the government, the democracy. Trump tried that to the point where, Pence has to overrule him and say, no, I can't. As vice president, I only have a ceremonial role in the Electoral College. I can't do any of this to certify. He wanted him to not certify electors that he didn't agree with from the states that he didn't agree with, which would give Trump the win. He doesn't have the power to do that. And so he said, no, I'm not going to do that. Imagine if he did, though. That would be crazy. I mean, it's crazy how close it got. And honestly, I didn't vote for Joe Biden because I'm in California. And so, I didn't think that I should vote for him. But if I had known that all of this was going to end up happening, there's literally going to be an attempt at overthrowing democracy itself entirely, I would have voted for Biden because, the numbers would have just helped just to at least, retain democracy itself. So this idea, this minimization of the issue and this idea of like, nah, forget that. Let's just talk about the normal issues. Like, wait. They don't believe in democracy. Do you want to vote for someone who doesn't believe in democratic results? That's a really huge issue. That's a fundamental issue that precedes the issues that you're voting on for them. It's like, it's a prerequisite for voting itself, right? Like, you have to be able to vote in a democracy. And so if you're voting for someone on specific issues without the prerequisite that they're Democrats, like they believe in democracy, that's kind of a big issue. Like, you know, you don't want to vote for a fascist, not only because a fascist is like, you know, maybe their inflation policies are not good. Like, it's like, wait, they're a fascist. They don't believe in freedom of speech. They don't believe in, you know, they don't believe in democracy itself. It's like, that's a big issue. That's a prerequisite to any of the other issues he's saying. So I'm just not really understanding. I mean, he's trying to make it seem like it's like a only thing where it's not really important and they're just trying to do smoke and mirror stuff. Are they trying to use it to boost like their political ambitions? Certainly, it's politics. That's the way it goes. Remember Benghazi and all of that stuff. So, you know, the Democrats never do even close to enough of that kind of stuff. But this idea that he's like saying, oh, it was totally clear when it came out, all the evidence. Like, no, it's not. The video of Bill Barr saying like, yo, like that's bullshit. And then the video of his own daughter, Ivanka, coming out and saying like, yeah, I believed what he said because I believe him. And then Jared Kushner saying like, oh, I don't know if he said it, but it was like a bunch of loonies and stuff like that. And there were loony groups and then the sane groups or whatever. Like literally, that's really important information. Anytime you're talking about a populist, especially like, you know, a U.S. populist, a voting populist, you have to be informed on stuff. You have to know stuff. How the fuck are you going to vote for stuff if you don't know anything? It's not possible, right? So it's incredibly important. All the information. We're getting informations about, oh, Kevin McCarthy had these text messages with these people. And we know about Ginny Thomas, who's, you know, the wife of Clarence Thomas. And we know about how he didn't recuse himself from the case. And we know about how a bunch of, you know, I think it was House representatives or senators or congressional members were, you know, trying to get pardons and stuff like that. That's all extremely, extremely important information for us to know in order to be able to make our decisions on who to vote for. And and this is this investigation that a lot of people, Saagar, Crystal Ball, I think even Kyle Kalinske was doing this too, were minimizing so constantly. I don't know why. It was a very serious incident that is really the most serious. Like I said, like it's an attempt to overthrow democracy itself, and you can't have anything in our system without democracy. And so before we get into the issues of, oh, what's your policy on inflation, I first want to know, do you believe in democracy or do you not? Because I want to be able to vote you out too. So if I vote for you for your inflation policies and then I don't like your inflation policies anymore, I can't vote you out? Well, that's why I want to make sure you support democracy first. So before I vote for you for your inflation policies, are you a Democrat? Do you believe in democracy? That's pretty fucking important, right? That's a prerequisite to all the other stuff that he's talking about. And so, I don't know, his arguments just seem really weak. I mean, it's obviously his job to be a political hack for the right wing. So, I mean, I'm not surprised, you know. I think he used to work at like the Daily Caller of Tucker Carlson. He's definitely kind of like, he's a wannabe Tucker Carlson is what he is. And so, you know, that's his job, is just downplay, whatever, it's nothing. As there's like new, really super important information that's coming out every single day. It's like, who's watching that stuff, man? Like, that's so stupid. Like, it's gas prices high. Like, yeah, dude, every day in the news, there's sky high gas prices in the news every single day. That's front page headlines nonstop. Okay, it's not like, oh man, why is no one talking about gas prices or anything? Like, yeah, we're talking about gas prices. We're talking about inflation, dog. But you know what we can also do? We can also talk about the attempt to overthrow democracy itself. Okay, how about we do both things at once? It's very serious what happened, honestly. And then you see, you know, the insurrection attempt on January 6th itself. You know, it's a really big deal, man. So I completely disagree with what Saagar is saying. And this weird attempt, I think it's because it was like, you know, all the Hillary stuff and that kind of stuff, like, oh, he uses bad language, he's a poor-mannered guy. I think it desensitized people to bullshit from Trump. And sure, this was Trump's strategy, right? Throw a bunch of crap at the wall so that you just can't, like, there's nothing you can do because there's so much crap coming out at you. It's like, there's so much stuff coming out every day. It's like you have to move on to the next one so quickly, you can't focus on one, and it turns into the big picture. Everything is so small. So, you know, I think it sort of led to a lower amount of attention to this and a lower amount of sensitivity to this because of just all of the desensitization that has happened. Because when someone just throws so much stuff at you, it's hard to focus. Like, someone's like, oh, like, why is Trump a racist? Like, there's so many different things he's done where it's like, it almost becomes, it's like, whoa, like, you have to think of like specific examples, like, whoa, like, it gets difficult because there's just so much different stuff. So that was always his strategy from day one. Is to make it so that it's hard to remember small things by just shelling you nonstop. So I think that's what resulted in this, but hopefully we can get out of that mindset of like, no, this is not Hillary saying that he uses bad language or said pussy. This is a literal attempt at overthrowing democracy. This is not, one of those stupid things. This is the most serious of all, because the prerequisite to voting for a politician based on their inflationary policies is that I want to know, do you believe in democracy? Do you believe in democracy? Or are you going to rig the election once you get elected and then I can't vote you out to get someone with different inflation policies? So, it's a prerequisite to the things, but he's like, nah, forget the prerequisite. Let's elect fascists who don't believe in elections and democracy based on their inflation policies. It's like, why? Why would you do that? Why would you not say, like, whoa. They don't even believe in democracy. Why would you vote for them even if you do agree with their inflationary policy? So, I think that the stuff he says is just kind of crazy.